But I feel lucky, but I also feel guilty for feeling lucky because there are a lot of people who had it a lot worse than we did. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
I don't think you're required to have any sense of guilt for feeling lucky. I can see the guilt of just not being hit while other people are hit like that. I can certainly understand. But I mean, if anything, feeling lucky is just a sense of gratefulness.
Yeah. And just seeing the just decimated, just everything gone, and realizing, oh, that could have been us.
I was listening to some firsthand accounts of what was happening in eastern Kentucky a month or two ago. They got hit by those horrible floods.
Yeah.
There's just a sense of me that's like, I should probably pay attention to these things because that's probably going to be all of us at some point or other.
I'm so good at catastrophizing, and that's what I was thinking, because we're only half a block from the river here. We're not like in the bay, but we're close to it. So it's like, we've lived in this house for 20 years. What's going to happen in 20 more, I
don't even think it's catastrophizing. I just think it's pragmatism. I mean, obviously, whatever, I don't even want to say politics. I don't think it's a political thing, but whatever your beliefs are, there's certainly no denying that these things are coming a lot more frequently and that they seem to be increasingly worse.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere. I mean, at one point, the rainforest was on fire. Australia was on fire. California's on fire.
The rainforest, I think, was, if I'm not mistaken, I think that was more of intentional. I think Bolsonaro is down there actually like burning down rainforest in Brazil.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think 2020 has skewed, like the whole pandemic has skewed my version of time, like my timeline. Like I'm thinking, how long ago was that? Wait, was that before COVID or after? And there's a clear pre and post, but everything that happened after is just kind of runny, I
had this conversation with a coworker. I flew out to San Francisco earlier this year, I think in the spring, and it was the first time I had seen them. And I referred to something as having been 5 years ago, and he said, just add 2 years to any number you say.
It's nuts. Yeah. It's gone. It's that we can't get that time back. It's frustrating. And has kind of like been a benchmark for me, this whole experience about, especially as a disabled woman, like how people feel and their compassion for their fellow man.
I don't know if funny is the right word. I've been on like a handful of dates in the past year, testing the water of interacting with other humans. And then at a certain point I was like, oh, this is not healthy, that this is how every single conversation is going to go. And probably like not a great way to leave a first impression on someone to just be talking about these things. But maybe there's a sense in which we have to kind of get some of these things out of the way as a formality.
Yeah. I mean, because it casts a shadow on everything. It just does, So let's talk about something.
People like cartoonists, a lot of artists, people who write and draw comics, and I'll ask them how the past couple of years have been, and they'll get very quiet and they'll say, it's been great. Nobody's bothered me. I've been able to sit in my room and work on this all day. And I understand that because nobody wants to say the pandemic's been good for them, and you feel like you might be discounting everything that everybody's been through.
I think that my marriage is even more rock solid than it was before. I think that it was an opportunity for us as a band to really like, okay, we're not practicing. Guess we got to figure out GarageBand. And, we all like Matt, our guitarist, he bought a Mac and we were demoing from home, and, it allowed us a little more room to stretch a little bit. And we originally we're going to go in September 2021 to make the record. And we, paused it because of the COVID, so, it gave us another solid year or so to finish working on the record.
At this point in your life and at this point in your career, especially given the large amount of time that lapsed before the previous album, do you feel more or less rushed to put new music into the world?
Oh, that's a tricky question because I know we have a determined endpoint, but we're not exactly spring chickens. So how much longer are we going to realistically be able to do this, and that has nothing to do with, me having MS or anything. It's just, how long can we continue to do this with our lives and our schedules and our kids and our families and everything,
Health gets to be a concern for everybody at a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all in our mid to late 40s, and Keith, my husband, he'll be 51 in October. So, we want to put music out but I find the greatest joy in writing, like actually being in the room with the four of them and just like the chemistry and kind of bouncing off each other. Like, I don't know, if I had my way, I might just always write and record.
Those two things specifically don't require necessarily being in the same room as other people, but it sounds like that was perhaps the main thing that you missed band-wise.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Because it was cool to do the demoing stuff at first. I mean, I'm talking like in the summer of 2020 when no one really knew which side was up, and then eventually we were able to ease back into practicing, but there'd be stops and starts because, Matt's kid was exposed to COVID, or, Brian's kid was exposed to COVID, or, so we'd have to stop and test and wait and then get back in and start practicing again. So it was definitely different than any other way we've done it, just because we didn't have a choice, but it actually worked out to be pretty satisfying. And it was good to be in a room with people that I trust and love, and we would practice and I would leave and I swear my chest would feel lighter because we could just kind of leave everything else outside of the room and just focus on music. And then, you go outside and, you're kind of slapped with everything else in the face. But in the meantime, you can just focus on music. So
in the same way that all of this stuff finds its way into the conversations that we have, is it inevitable that it's going to seep into the songs a bit?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I write about personal experiences, and probably sometimes I'm a little too open, but it is what it is. So yeah, if I think about the record, there's probably maybe one or two songs that are directly related to things about COVID, but they're still also about other things too. Cause my head is a mess. It's a mess up there. So
what does it mean to be too open? And at what point in the process do you realize that you are perhaps being too open?
When it's too late, usually. So
the song is recorded.
Yeah. Well, there are many, many songs that I've scrapped because it's too blatant, and it's too blatant, or it's too fresh, or, it's too obvious. And that I realized then but sometimes I'll write things and then it's on the record and then I'll look back and go, oh, okay. So I can't change anything about it. I have to be okay with it. And I'm obviously confident enough about the song that we wrote to put it on there. So I should be okay with the subject matter. And ultimately it's my choice, so. One
of the things that's always super interesting to me, and I hear this from a lot of musicians, that there are so many cases of things that it almost wasn't apparent to you what you were writing about when you were writing about it. And then, years later you'll be on stage and then it'll just it'll click.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have definitely experienced that. Even though everything is pretty pointed and in, the direction I'm going lyrically, I'll look back when I have, a different perspective on it and realize that I was actually writing about something else, like you said, and especially having the ability to look back and see these songs that I've written, some of the songs I wrote when I was 19 and playing in those songs and the way they hold meaning now are completely different. It's really cool to sit with the same content, that you created a lifetime ago and look at it completely differently.
Not to put you too much on the spot here, but what's an example of something that really has taken on completely different meaning, 20, 30 years later?
Well, there is one song that I wrote about some friends that had done me wrong, but looking back on it, I was really the one who I made the choices, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't, a major shift, and I didn't lose lifelong friends or anything. And, years later, I apologized and they were like, well, we were kids. Cause we were kids, young kids. And in the grand scheme of life, it's just a drop in the bucket. It doesn't really mean anything, but, there is definitely one and I'm sure there's more. If I scanned through all of the songs that I've written, I could be like, yeah, oh yeah, that one too,
There's a sense in which writing a song about it is almost even more of a slight, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like airing laundry.
Well, but you have to be careful as a listener, the songwriter could be manipulating you to believe their side of the story, and there's two sides to every story. And I have a habit of listening to other songs and immediately deciding what the situation is about. And then I even want to know more detail and know more about the songwriter and what they were doing and what was going on in their lives. Like that's how detailed I get. It's kind of obsessive in an unhealthy way.
So your own work over the years, is there a sense in which it's almost been journaling for you?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And sometimes stuff gets dark, and that's the best way for me to deal with it is I just got to lay it all out and just get it out. And sometimes whenever I'm feeling, the feelings will be resolved just by writing that song. But a lot of the times I get way more satisfaction out of playing it over and over and over and over again.
Pohgoh wasn't together for a while, but I know you're still doing things in the music world, but I'm guessing that there were fairly long gaps when you weren't really writing songs. Do you have to transfer that energy somewhere else?
Well, when I was first diagnosed, I couldn't play guitar at all. My hands were too numb. And then a few years later, I was able to start playing again. But my husband was in a band and I was extremely jealous because I missed being in a band, and I didn't really have anywhere for it to go. I was still writing, but certainly not at a pace that I was at any point. And then eventually we started a band with some friends and I had 10 years worth of songs to cherry pick my favorites from.
So you were banking things in that time?
Well, I wasn't, I'm talking maybe 10 or 15 songs. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't setting a goal to write a song a day. It was just let me just write about this. And I don't ever really I think about an idea and then I just sit down and I start thinking about a melody and then it all just kind of comes pouring out. I'm pretty much a hermit anyway. So I just internalize everything,
I'll talk to people on the podcast, or I'll go interview somebody on a big stage, or go on TV or something. But
it's different. If
I go to a party and I don't know anybody, I'm just sitting in the corner the entire time.
When can I leave?
Yeah, it's sort of reconciling that the introversion and then the desire to perform, to be out in front of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that playing and getting that immediate feedback and the energy from people that you're playing in front of, and, obviously from people that you're playing with, that's a different kind of interaction than, just sitting and having a conversation with someone one-on-one. And it gives you a completely different sense of of where you are in your body, I think that I think there's just a part of me that wants that attention and that, and the good reviews and the feedback and people telling me good things. But then I also feel like, I was an introvert before, but not being able to walk and being disabled, I have a lot of barriers in my life. And then you pack on the pandemic and, all of the concerns with that. And I was definitely staying home. So whatever, I think I have actually become more of an introvert since all of this started. I think I already was, but I just rather stay home, Is it terrible to say I don't really like people anymore? I don't know. I mean, there's a core group of family and friends that I love and I trust, but I just feel let down by everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's that thing of, if the circumstances were right the first time you met somebody and you had that interaction, then it would be possible to like them. But I think where we all kind of sit now is just looking at the world as this big, just massive humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think that you can be an introvert and still, crave that kind of stage interaction, with people. It's an interesting duality.
Well, you use the word energy to describe that experience of playing in front of an audience, and I've heard that again from a lot of musicians of the sort of the interchange of energy between one another. And I think that I was talking to somebody about this. I was talking to a musician who's in a similar role who considers himself an introvert. He framed it in a way that really makes a lot of sense to me that I've kept with me since then, which is, for him at least, and I feel this way too, being introverted means you have to recharge. And recharging is, I mean, what is recharging but the act of getting that energy back?
That's a great way to put it. I've never even thought about that before. The only problem is we don't play that much. So, the energy that I get is not that frequent, especially in the past 2.5 years. So, I mean, 2019 for us was a crazy good year for the band. And then we had this momentum and then everything came to a screeching halt. I do miss playing shows, but there's just that element of, and I guess now everybody is just kind of feeling like everything is over, but I mean, I'm still at risk because I'm on a medication that, suppresses my immune system. So there are still considerations for me. So like when we play our album release show, I'll be wearing a mask in the crowd. I'll have it off obviously while I'm singing, but and that kind of changes the way we are approaching things also. And that's why I feel a little let down by everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean the general public.
No, I was at an event today and I think the only person with a mask in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate, but I don't really know. I mean, we're talking about doing some shows next year and, potentially doing some tours, but I don't really know what it looks like for us right now. And that's okay. 'Cause that's how things happen, things change. But I'm really happy with this record and, I feel like it's probably I know I probably say this every time I put something out. It's my favorite. It's my favorite so far. But I say that every time something comes out. But
well, now you're saying so far, which implies that you're going to say it again.
Yeah.
Bracing yourself for it.
Yeah.
You use the word momentum, and it's a word that I've been thinking about a lot over the past few years in terms of the pandemic and kind of re-engaging or I was somebody that went into the office every day, and now I work from home, and it's great. I don't know why I didn't do it the entire time, and I don't know why I was on the subway for an hour there and back. But
Oof.
for me in the pandemic, momentum it was momentum that kept me going. It was knowing that every day I had to get up and go out.
Mm-hmm.
And that forced me to sort of to engage with the world. And when I was out, that meant I, could stay out, and that meant I could meet people in the city. And now that's all gone. And it's really difficult finding the energy to kickstart yourself again.
I've been working from home since 2006, and have been, I've been using a scooter or not walking, for 7 years. But I was still, I would still get out and do things. But then when the pandemic happened, the scope of my world got even smaller, So, there was momentum, and now it's just stasis, just sitting here, and we're in the same routine. And I'm just wondering if we'll ever fully recover. As a country, as a world, I don't know that we will, just because you can't just push it to the side and forget about it, it's still here, and it's still problematic. But it could have been handled better, obviously, and could have been not a non-issue. Is it really worth talking about now? I don't know.
I do want to talk about positive momentum. Obviously, there was a sense in which the band was kind of still not necessarily maybe exactly broken up, and that you would still play shows from, time to time or once a year or something like that. But it sounds like when you really decided to give this whole thing a go again, it re-energized everybody in a really profound way.
Yes. Yeah. You're right. We had gotten together back together a few times over the years. But nobody could ever really fully commit to it. And then the last time we reunited, I think it was 2015 or 2016. We said, why are we not doing this all the time? Because we had so much fun. And, our original bass player, Brad, could not commit full time. But Brian, who has been a friend of ours and in the same scene, we've known him for 25, 30 years. He's been in the band now longer, the second incarnation, than Brad was the first time,
That's such a funny thing about bands. You find out that I don't know, the Pixies have been reunited for like 3 times longer than they were. And I think it's just that thing that you experience time much differently when you're younger.
Yes, 1000%. Because you think about, I think about the band and what I did when I was in the band. And it was I don't know, a year and a half. But I look back on it with this massive amount of nostalgia, oh, that was the best time. But, we're all in a good place right now. We're all, stable and happy, and we have the time to commit to do this, and it's fulfilling for all of us. And that's the positive momentum, is that we keep showing up every week. And, it's positive for me in the sense that I really feel because playing music, you engage all areas of your brain, and playing music for as long as I have, I'm sure that's been beneficial to, staving off any cognitive impairments that are related to MS. And I play every day. Sometimes it's an exercise in futility. Sometimes I'm playing with, frozen hot dogs for hands, but it just keeps my muscle memory going. It keeps my brain functioning. It just, ignites something inside of me that just I just want to keep going, So it's really important to me. Like you said, it's definitely, it takes the place of journaling. But I think that since we've been back together, we've really been able to hone what it is that we want to do with the band and talk about, maybe stepping outside and doing things that are a little out of our comfort zone and, bringing Brian into the band. He's been bringing songs to practice too. So we've had, a third songwriter and that changes the dynamic completely. And it's been, really fun, and a really exciting time for us too. So, even if it's just for like 2 hours once a week, the four of us, but then I'm still playing every day. And like I said, sometimes it's an exercise in futility, but stubborn sometimes to the point of being detrimental. Like I wonder if I should just stop with the power chords and play with an open tuning, because I have dexterity problems. Like I don't wear earrings with backs. I can't button my shirt. I can't wear shirts with buttons. So the fact that I'm still playing guitar it's pretty cool. Whether or not it is something I'm going to continue to be able to do, I don't know. But the thing about MS is that you can have a great day and then you can have a really terrible day. And there's really no explanation for it, So
that's the frozen hot dog hands. There's just some days are frozen hot dog hands days.
Yeah. And for me, it's sometimes more often than not, but, I get comfortable in my relative level of function, but then when I think about things that I can or can't do in comparison to other people, it's really quite shocking that I feel like I'm just like everybody else, because in fact, I'm not, the fact that I'm so determined to continue to play guitar that we have to have everything set up just so my pedal board I have a rug and there are outlines of circles where to set my chair. My pedal board has to be in this place. Here's the chalk lines for my pedal board. I have to be situated in an exact certain way. I can press my Tube Screamer pedal that I've had for 25 years, but I have to keep my foot resting on it. So like everything has to be, every hair in place. And then maybe I'll still be able to pull it off. You know what I mean? So it's very choreographed, in the preparation for it, I should say, to actually play a show.
What happens when you get frozen hot dog hands on the road?
Have a bad night. There's no way.
Can somebody else do the heavy lifting in terms of like the guitar playing or? Oh
yeah. Well, for sure. I play rhythm guitar. Matt is our lead guitarist. I'm a songwriter. That's how I write songs, is on guitar. And then I'm just playing what I wrote, essentially. Sometimes I'll get a little fancy, but I can't get too fancy because I don't have the dexterity for it. When it happens, and then when it does happen, like there's been shows where just the first song out of the gate, I get flustered and I mess up, and then I'm in my head for the entire set and everything's terrible for me. And then sometimes I'll feel like everything's terrible, and then everyone in the band will be like, well, what are you talking about? That was great. And I think that's just because I'm just very hard on myself, in general. So.
Yeah, I obviously this is not at all comparable, but I was dealing with the health thing at the beginning of the pandemic. And I had facial paralysis for about 6 months there. Mm-hmm. And something that I had a lot of trouble articulating was the frustration is part of it, but also just, the first time you encounter not being able to move a muscle, of your nerves and your brain, just not being able to connect those two things, it's mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm. And scary, so scary. One of my relapses, I had Bell's palsy on one side of, yeah. So yeah, and the thing about MS is that it can literally affect any part of your body. I met someone last year, 2 years ago, who also has MS, and she's had MS for as long as I have, and she's fully mobile. She can walk, but she is almost completely deaf. So, I mean, if I got to pick or choose, that I would definitely, I want to be able to still sing and speak and listen and, think of ideas. And so far, I mean, this month will actually be 21 years since my diagnosis.
Your MS can drink.
Oh, I know. And it should have a drink because it's been very mean to me over the years. But
do you know Will Cullen Hart from the Olivia Tremor Control?
I don't know him. I know of him. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that band too.
Because he's been living with MS for
oh really? I didn't know
at least 10 years. Yeah. He can walk. I think he can still play guitar. But obviously, yeah. I mean, it's. I think in a strange way, maybe the things that other people don't see can be the most difficult sometimes.
Well, yes, because I'm in my scooter and I'm sitting in my scooter, and that's how you see me. You see me driving around this it looks like a cart, it looks fun. Like I was out today and someone said, yeah, man, I wish I had one of those. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I wish I had functioning legs and feet. But no one really sees the day-to-day of me transferring from my scooter to the bed, getting dressed. I have a ramp van and I drive with hand controls, and I still do strength training. But it's just my upper body. So, but no one sees me, get on the mat and how I actually get around and function. And it's kind of a shock sometimes when people come to the house and even family sometimes, because they'll only see me when I'm at their house and I'm in my scooter. But when I'm actually in my house and doing things and trying to get around, it is a little bit of shock. They're like, oh, because they just see me sitting in my scooter and they think that's it, but there's so many layers to what's happening in my body right now. I couldn't even begin I could, but it would take a really long time for me to list every single symptom. It's a lot, not for nothing. I mean, I've tried a lot of medications over the years. So I've tried medications, I've tried diet, I've tried acupuncture, I've tried a couple experimental things. I've tried, some kooky technique to check to see if you're being treated properly. I've tried chiropractor. I've tried physical therapy. I mean, you name it, I've tried it. I have darkened every door of possible ways to treat this. And that is also frustrating too, to just bang your head against the wall and just continue to get worse. And, I also think about that and too, in terms of the band, because over the past couple of years, my legs have gotten worse. They're very stiff. And what's going to happen when something else happens, and I can't really think too much about that. I think it's important, especially with me, I can just snowball and get to a really dark place. But if we can just, focus on what we're doing right now and I don't think about those possibilities, it really is a positive thing that we're doing all of this right now, because it keeps the demons off my shoulder, dark stuff.
I mean, obviously time is finite for all of us at the end of the day, but it is a sense in which being diagnosed, and realizing that you're not necessarily going to be able to get up on stage and play forever. Is there a sense in which that was a motivating factor for reuniting the band, or at least keeping going?
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Because, we had done bands in between, when we had first originally formed, and then, when we got back together. And they were fun. And I put my guitar down because I couldn't play. So I started playing keyboards, and I did something totally different, but it wasn't it, it didn't click, right? It was fun, and we had a great time, but it wasn't the thing, and then when we got the band back together, and I was like, okay, we need to do this now. And because we have a lot of time to make up for, a lot of lost time. And I mentioned I was only in the band for a year and a half, but even then, like with the original singer, they did 2 tours, and then we did 1 tour, and that was it. We were never out there touring like 3-6 months out of the year. We never did that. And now we're at a place where it's not really something we could do either, because we all have all boring responsibilities and, kids and jobs and all that stuff. And to be able to do it comfortably, not like a punk tour, because we did that in 2018, and it was hard because...
I mean, even if you didn't have MS, there's a certain point in your life where you can't sleep on floors anymore.
Yeah, no, we did spring for hotels. We did do that at least, but like the boys would have to carry me on stage because there's no way for me to get on stage.
Yeah.
And we did that when we went to Japan too. And the only tour that we've done that was not an issue was with Jawbreaker, and that was a total fluke for us to get on that tour. It was a dream. It was amazing. But playing those types of venues, they have, the setup to move large equipment. So moving my scooter around was no problem. So we got a little taste of what that would be like, and that was cool. But yeah, I think that there is a nagging voice in the back of my head saying, you need to do this now for as long as you can, and then do it until I can't do it anymore, and I don't know when that's going to be. So I'm just going to keep doing it until I can't anymore. And when I can't, I don't really want to think about that, because that'll be sad. Like, I think that I'll be singing. I think at some point my hands will be like, no, do this anymore. Cause it's a struggle. I'm not gonna lie.
My grandmother had MS for most of her adult life. So that her struggles are something that I've thought about a lot over the years. And I think that a part about it that maybe doesn't get talked about enough, because obviously there's enough kind of to talk about in terms of the condition itself, but is having to, you mentioned these moments of them literally having to pick you up and move you.
Mm-hmm.
And, as somebody who I assume has been fairly independent, or maybe very independent your entire life, you have to
mm-hmm.
sort of, obviously you have to trust people, but also like
swallow your pride.
You have to swallow your pride, and you have to like be okay with people doing things for you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a fine line between someone wanting to be helpful and someone just making it worse. Because unless they understand specifically what it is that I need, like if a stranger is like, oh, let me help you. And I'll be like, no, I got it. It's okay. Because then I have to explain everything. You got to do it. This is how you help me bend my legs. You got to pretend like they're Barbie legs and bend it like that. And it's this whole thing.
You'd rather not have a stranger bend your legs
right.
too,
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. And then there's always they'll see me on the scooter. What happened to you? Are you hurt? It's like, no, that's none of your business. But anyway, with the band, I mean, they're like family to me. And obviously my husband's in the band. So, I trust them completely. And they've known me long enough to know what I can and can't do and what I need help with. And I'm not afraid to ask for help. I am very independent, but I'm also not, yes, an introvert and how I like to spend my time. But if I need to reach something on a shelf, I'll say, excuse me, can you help me grab that? That's different, than having someone offer to, do something for you that you don't even need, So asking for help is one thing. But having someone know exactly the kind of help you need is completely different,
I'm always so interested when somebody steps into a role in a band. I mean, obviously that happens a lot, but you don't often see the singer or the songwriter, the front person doing that. Mm-hmm. That's a lot less common. How did that feel early on? Was there insecurity as far as like actually coming in and really filling somebody's shoes?
Yeah, for sure. Because, well, first of all, I was extremely jealous of Pohgoh when I was in the scene.
Okay, so you were a fan before.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, and the original singer Kobe was and is just this enigmatic person. She's dancing all over the stage and acting goofy, and it was a completely different band. So when they asked me to join, they decided to keep the name, but like the very first practice, we all realized this is not the same band when you add a second guitar. And we decided just to keep the name, but it just became a completely different animal, and she had some big shoes to fill, and it was really scary, my first practice with them. And I can even remember like when we went to record a 7-inch, and I had recorded before, but not with them. I had done, and I had gone to a studio and done live 2-track to ADAT. So that dates me significantly. But when we went to record and I went to do vocals, they tell the story about, I don't remember this because I was probably just so nervous. I was jumping out of my skin. But they said
in a fugue state at the time.
Exactly. They said I got up to the mic and I was singing like this real quiet. And they just kind of looked at each other and they were like, what are we going to do? And so, yeah. And they had to like talk to me like, you gotta, put some oomph behind it. Don't be scared. And then it was, a game changer. But even since then, I still have insecurities, and it's funny because, obviously I get feedback from the band and everything about songs and stuff, but I said something to Keith the other day about, how come you never talk about why you like being in a band with me? And he said, well, I'm in a band with you, aren't I? So, you've been with playing with these people for so long. It's just kind of understood that, of course, I'm playing with you because I
sure. Like your friends don't like volunteer why they're friends with you all the time.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that there's even still, I think Matt and Keith have a connection because they were the original two.
There are cliques?
Yeah, well, even between 4 people, it sounds ridiculous, but they'll just look at each other and they can start a song. There's no talking, but then again, I can play a song and then Matt will come up with a part that fits exactly, and he'll know exactly what I wanted him to play without me having even to articulate it. And then Brian just, comes in and does some Carl Alvarez bass lines and all over the place. And I think he had 2 punches when he recorded his tracks, when we did the record. So he's just insanely talented, and he falls right in line with all of us because we've all been friends for so long. So, but even then still, there's a different breakdown where you have me and Keith, and then you have Matt and Brian. So it's like the married couple and then the 2 other people in the band.
Talk about dynamics that have broken up bands in the past.
Well, we do have,
you weren't married the first time around. That
no.
happened in the interim.
Yeah. We weren't married the first time. He fell in love with me when we were on tour, but, He did tell me that. Like he got back from tour and he's like, man, I have a real problem. I'm in love with my friend's girlfriend, and he still had a girlfriend, and it was this whole thing, but we didn't even date until years after any of that. So we have to actively say to each other, like, okay, we're not married. We're going to practice right now. Cause we can get a little, bickery, and it gets a little uncomfortable for the boys. And we have a safe word. If we're arguing too much, they're allowed to say Engelbert Humperdinck, and then we start laughing, and it's all over. So it's only been used like a few times, but I have to separate myself as a wife when I'm in the band, because I can't take any of it personally, because we're business when it's in the band. You know what I mean? And so we'll have disagreements about a song arrangement or whatever. And then it used to be when we were on the way home, I would be like, here's the last thing I'm going to say about that, you know, which is something I'm famous for saying anyway, because I'll bring something up like an hour after it happened. But now we're at the point where we're able to just have our disagreement about whatever. And then we get in the car and it's like we both came from our other band practices and we're fine. So that took a little bit of, and I'm sure we hammered all of that out too in the band that we were. I apologize to the other people that we played with, because I know we were real contentious, because we hadn't quite figured out that yet, that interaction between, you know, Keith and I. It's different now that we're married and in a band together, obviously. It's complicated, but good.
I was watching and reading some interviews that you did, and I think Keith volunteered the fact that he was the reason you didn't sign a record deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We were supposed to sign with this label, and he had been through a bad breakup, and he just kind of lost it, like literally. And we were going the next day to sign the contract, and it just wasn't the right time. It was, you know, it all was meant to happen the way it was. But you know, everything in its own time, right? We met with him at Denny's afterwards to try and talk to him about it. And he's like, yeah, I don't even remember that. So he was just heartbroken. It was bad. So yeah, we were supposed to, and then, with Pohgoh, and then we had a second band, and we were going to sign with this label called Tree Records. We were going to have to tour like 6 months out of the year. And then someone else in the band had some problems, and then I got MS. So there's always seemed to have been some bad timing when everything starts to get, you know what? I'm just now realizing that. Okay. So we almost signed the record deal and Keith quits. Then we almost signed another record deal, and then that band falls apart. And then we have an amazing year in 2019, and then the pandemic. So maybe there's a curse on our band. I don't know.
It sounds like you're in a good place with all of that now, you know, in terms of things happening the way they happen for a reason, but I mean, at the time, it's probably got to be difficult to not have some major regrets about something like that.
I mean, I do regret not having that experience, you know, of being on tour, just like that relentless touring and just getting really good at playing guitar and, you know, just doing it, you know, living it. And I never had the opportunity to do that. And because obviously we had the opportunity, but then once I was diagnosed, I needed a few years just to kind of find my bearings anyway, to see which way was up. And then only then could I even think about if it's something that I wanted to do again, you know?
Was it clear prior to getting the band back together that that was something that you wanted to do at some point?
I mean, it's always been in the back of my mind, and I've always wanted to again, but I never knew if everybody else was on board or even wanted to, you know? And, you know, there was many years where it wasn't the right time, you know? Yeah. Like even one of the first reunions we did, I wasn't playing guitar, I just sang. So even getting to a point where I felt comfortable playing guitar live in band took a lot of nerve for me, you know? So there's the wanting to do it, and then there's the execution of it, you know, and the logistics of that. And, you know, being disabled just complicates all of that. So there's a lot of things to think about when we're making these decisions now. It's not like, let's get in the van and tour, you know, it's not that simple anymore.
And obviously things get complicated as you get older and have responsibilities and things like that. At what point was it clear that it was working?
Oh, as soon as we started practicing again. It was like, we all just, I think it was because I was playing guitar again, and we were all just kind of like, you know, looking at each other like, let's do this more. You know, like I said before, why did we ever stop? And you make time for the things that are important to you. That's the bottom line, you know? So we're making time for it, and it's a conscious choice. And I think it's one of the best decisions we've made, like ever, to get this band back together, because, it makes me happy, and it makes all of us happy. And isn't that the reason for doing it in the first place? I mean, people telling you the record is nice is great, but you know, what is driving you to do it in the first place? And that's for me is to be productive and creative, and, you know, do it with people that, have the same goals and ideas that I do. And that's enough, given everything else going on in my life. You know, it's not just enough, it's a gift. And I don't take that lightly, you know? So I'm really glad that we started back up again. It's really meant a lot. And we've already put 2 records out, so that's pretty great. With someone who we greatly admire and are huge fans of. So, those experiences alone have been worth the entire ride. So not to mention all the other crazy cool things we've gotten to do so far.